apps, as suggested by the Green Party earlier this week. He says that's wrong, so that's good news. Clive, you're still there?
I am.
What do you think of the Waterview connection?
Well, I mean, it's a classic case of putting out a fire with petrol. When it was first proposed, they were saying it was going to be saving Auckland motorists 15 minutes each way per trip. And they were basing that on 2001 figures when they went ahead with it in 2009. And the cost was about the same as putting in a proper rail tunnel to the CBD, which would have, actually reduced congestion. So if this was a public transport scheme by the Labour Party, there would be calls for ministers to resign. It's been late, it's over budget. It's not actually going to solve the congestion, and it's going to save time for people who don't regularly commute, which unfortunately is the majority of Aucklanders. Auckland is terrible at all times, but, for people who say need to run kids to school or need to get to work themselves, it's not actually going to help. At best, it's going to move the congestion 500 metres up the road.
It's estimated about 90,000 vehicles will use the six-lane connection daily. There's no way you're going to get 90,000 vehicles quickly through there.
No, I mean, everybody knows the solution to Auckland's problem is to get people out of cars, to make it just unfeasible to drive in at certain times or in certain areas. I mean, we went to the airport last week to take an international flight, gave ourselves plenty of time, still hit a snarl, and I just looked at the road leading to Auckland Airport and I thought, how on earth can you call yourself a developed country when you don't have a rail link to the biggest airport in the country? It's just astonishing. And there's generations of planners that have failed to see that and do anything about it. And the only way it's going to get fixed in Auckland is for someone to be brave and just say, I don't care what anyone else says, we're going to do it. And till then, I'm not holding my breath.
Does anyone want to wager a bet on the opening date for the tunnel?
Well, perhaps they need to just fix the tiles that are falling off the ceiling onto the road. That might help the opening.
Hopefully.
I've had that on good authority.
Oh, you heard it here first.
We'll do one last story. Thank you so much for joining us. That was, I have to go back to the right story script. Clive, Matthew Wilson, joining us. Thank you very much, Clive.
Thank you.
Very quickly, before we finish, duck hunting season opens tomorrow. There are some new rules. Game bird hunters have to restrict the number of shots they can use. In the organisation, the Fish and Game says the new rule was introduced for sound conservation and sporting reasons. Last year there were 3 accidents on the first day of duck shooting, I suppose, and more protests this year.
Well, that's because people aren't taught how to respect firearms. I was a duck shooter in my youth, and I can shoot. My ex-husband is an avid duck shooter and he'll be out there. But it's all about respect of the firearm and being taught how to handle it and to look after it. It's just it's just shoddy, I'm afraid.
What about the poor ducks, Julia?
Well, look, here's the thing. The ducks are killed. If you're a good shot, the duck is killed clean and it's one shot, it's gone. And that's how it should be. That's humane, and you've got to do it. You've got to cull them. Ducks do need to be culled? They do, of course they do. They breed disease if you don't. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Finlay McDonald and Julia Hartley-Moore.
Welcome.
And I've been
Thank
Megan
you.
Whelan. Thank you for the show. You can join Jim. We'll be back on Monday with people. Jim will be back on Monday. You can also catch him on Sunday, filling in for Wallace Chapman. It is 1 minute to 5, so it's time for Checkpoint.
Kia ora. Jury has just found daycare supervisor Lynn Abraham guilty on 10 of 11 assault charges of children in her care. We will have more on that tonight. The police release over 13 hours of footage from the drift of the Pike River mine. We asked them why it's taken more than 6 years and Official Information Act requests from the families to do so. The Kitty family who discovered the dreaded Myrtle rust. The Sun's Royals photographer Arthur Edwards on Prince Philip. We're out with parking wardens wearing body cameras in Dunedin. The use of sprinklers to deter homeless people from sleeping in doorways in Auckland CBD. Joseph Parker and the surfer who spent 30 hours clinging to his board in the Irish Sea. Thank you for being with us. We're here after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 5. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The daycare supervisor and teacher Lynn Abraham, accused of assaulting children in her care, has been found guilty on the majority of the charges. She was accused of smacking, force-feeding children and taping a 4-year-old's mouth closed. The Crown's case was that Ms Abraham wasn't coping under the stress and assaulted the children. 3 of her colleagues told the court they saw her assault the children over 4 years at Bright Minds Childcare Centre in St John's. Ms Abraham denied that, saying she tapped the hands of children to stop them snatching toys or throwing food, but did not smack them. A toned-down version of the plan to significantly increase the rates bill for Auckland hotels has prompted a new warning of legal action. The Mayor Phil Goff has cut his target of raising an extra $28 million to $18 million. But the tourism sector says the new plan is worse than the old one. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Niall reports.
Phil Goff wants the accommodation sector to pick up the cost of promoting tourism and staging major events, freeing up money for infrastructure. He's lowered the proposed hike for central city hotels, but some rate bills could still double. The revised plan excludes backpackers, campgrounds and accommodation on the rural fringe of the city. Tourism industry Aotearoa says the exemptions make it even more inequitable and increase the likelihood of a legal challenge if councillors vote it in next month. I Tamaki Makoro, ko Todd Niall tēnei.
MPI and DOC staff are ramping up their biosecurity operation in Kirikiri after the discovery of the killer plant disease Myrtle rust in a local nursery. The fungal disease could seriously damage native trees, including puhutakawa and manuka, and some fruit trees. The Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, says MPI and DOC will have 100 people working in Kirikiri within days in a bid to stop Myrtle rust taking hold. Staff will be checking trees within a 500-metre radius and spraying vulnerable species with fungicide. The Conservation Minister Maggie Barry says there's no sign of the bright yellow rust in local native forests so far, but she's urging home gardeners to check any myrtle species, including Fijos, and call the ministry if they find any sign of the disease. The Police Deputy Commissioner Mike Bush says the police have acted transparently with the families of the 29 men who died in the Pike River mine disaster. The police today released all 13 hours of footage taken by a robot inside the Pike River mine, 3 months after the 2010 disaster. Some footage shows a robot and 2 workers inside the mine's access tunnel. The public release of the material comes after footage was leaked to some of the victims' families, who claim the police did not show it to them. They say the video proves the mine's main entry tunnel is safe to search for bodies and evidence, which the mine's owner disputes. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says the police have never tried to mislead the Pike River mine families. Houses have been destroyed and trees toppled in Vanuatu's northern islands as the slow-moving cyclone Donna crosses the country. The Category 3 storm is currently hitting the Banks and Torres Islands of Toba province, with winds gusting as high as 205 kilometres per hour. The Vanuatu Director of Aid Agency World Vision, Michael Wolf, says he's starting to hear reports of destruction in Toba.
As we speak, the cyclone is going through Toba and is impacting Toba. But we're getting some preliminary reports of, trees down and houses and churches down. People are sheltering in the evacuation shelters.
A curfew has been imposed in the north and hundreds of people have sought shelter in caves and evacuation centres. The Auckland City Missioner says he's appalled that rough sleepers are having sprinklers turned on them as winter approaches. Several inner-city buildings, including a private school, use the automatic sprinklers to deter people from sleeping in their doorways. Some say staff or residents are being intimidated and they're sick of cleaning up faeces, vomit or urine. The Auckland City Missioner, Chris Farrelly, says he feels for these shop owners, but cruelty is not the answer to a complicated problem.
We know that there's a story behind every one of these people, a tragic story generally, and again, we're just devastated that people could think of throwing water on them.
Chris Farrelly says he wants to work with the Auckland Council and businesses to find a better solution. There'll be nothing fancy in the Kiwis' game plan in tonight's rugby league test against Australia in Canberra as they seek to turn around a miserable record in Anzac Rugby League history. New Zealand has won just 2 of the mid-year Trans-Tasman tests since 1997 and have lost their last 4 tests to the Kangaroos, the last being a 20-point thrashing in last year's Four Nations final. Despite the return of the likes of Kieran Foran and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, the Kiwis captain Jesse Bromwich says the focus of training has been on getting the basics right.
This will be the 3rd game in 11 days, so for us it's about keeping it simple, and the whole week's just been about recovering well from that amount of games in that short time.
Kiwis captain Jesse Bromwich. The South African side, the Stormers, will have to end the Hurricanes' longest winning streak on home turf if they're to topple the defending Super Rugby champions in Wellington tonight. The Stormers have won 6 of the last 8 encounters between the two sides, but the points have mounted up against them on their latest trip to New Zealand, with comprehensive losses to the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. Manchester United have beaten Spanish club Celta Vigo 1-0 in the first leg of their Europa Cup football semi-final in Vigo. It puts them on course for this month's final, probably against Ajax Amsterdam. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, country life goes hydroponic and reaps a few raspberries in the process while trying to keep the lid on Chilean needlegrass. Liggins Institute Director Professor Frank Bloomfield explains why he's squeezing 20 dames into one room. It's bound to have something to do with medical research. And we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the sounds and songs of kitchens. On Nights, your recipe for good radio, with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from the Met Service to midnight Saturday, and it is pretty short for all of the North Island, mainly fine apart from a few showers about Mahia Peninsula and coastal Gisborne. Early morning frosts in sheltered places tomorrow. Nelson, Buller and Westland fine today. Areas of cloud tomorrow with isolated afternoon and evening showers in Buller and northern Westland. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, fine with frosts tomorrow morning. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, a few light showers about the south coast, mainly fine elsewhere. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. RNZ National at 5 past.
This is the shortest weather forecast ever. Thanks, Anna Thomas. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with Checkpoint. A jury has just found, as Anna said, Daycare supervisor Lynn Abraham guilty on 10 of 11 charges of assaulting children in her care. Our court reporter Edward Gay is there and we'll cross live to him shortly. But we begin tonight with the police releasing over 13 hours of video footage taken by a robot inside the Pike River drift in March 2011. It's been a long time coming, requested repeatedly by family members, including under the Official Information Act. Its official release comes just days after it was obtained by the media, who'd already made some of it public. This week there's been a sharp divide between families and police and the government over who had previously seen what. We hear from the police next. Now, much of the footage is grainy, black and white and repetitive, but some of it is in colour, and a very small amount of it shows something the families swear they have never seen before and say they should have.
At 3:24 p.m. on the 13th of March 2011, a man walked along the drift at Pike. We've slowed the footage. He's wearing breathing apparatus, gumboots, overalls, and his hands are bare. When he disappears from shot, a cable he's been holding swings back and forth. The scene is spotlit, but the light reaches only so far. It's in colour, it's a striking and utterly distinctive shot, and the families are adamant they have never seen it before. Carol Rose, who took the minutes at the family meetings.
Have you seen this footage before?
No, John, never seen that. Now, the government is saying that they've shown excerpts, and then now I hear that they've released notes on their meetings, of those meetings in Christchurch and Greymouth in July of 2011, and that possibly is the case, that they definitely did show us some footage. But, John, it was always black and white, grainy. It was terrible footage. We've never seen this colour footage and footage this clear. We've never seen footage like this anywhere that's been that clear.
And men up the drift.
And men up the drift. I mean, that was huge. We had no idea there'd been men in the drift, other than Mines Rescue when they went in to put the seal in at 170 metres. We knew that they'd done that. But we didn't know that there had been men in the drift that early in the piece.
You took minutes of these meetings, didn't you?
I did. My job was to record what was happening.
So if this footage had been played at a meeting, you would have been there, right?
Absolutely, I was there. Yes, I was at that meeting. I didn't miss, Steve and I didn't miss any meetings where they showed any footage or images. In fact, in those early days, we didn't miss any meeting.
I remember visiting you. What was it called? What was it called? Wild Flame, your business? Was
No, West Flame. Yeah, I remember coming back from town and you were parked outside the gate. Yeah, that's right.
And you didn't want to talk to me, but you and Steve were unbelievably kind. And the reason you didn't want to talk to me was because you had faith in the process. You trusted that people would do right by you and right by Stuart and your boys.
That's right.
How do you feel 6.5 years on?
Oh, well, look, it's frustrating. You know, I don't think anything could surprise us now. Although this has, well, I don't know that this has surprised us really. Anything we've had, any footage or images that we've seen have always been leaked to us. We've never had anything that's been willingly given to us that's been of any use to us at all. But, you know, I really don't know what the problem is here, because the footage that's been leaked to us shows that the drift has retained its integrity, that it's still structurally sound. And that supports the original plan to recover the drift, of course, which was to explore 400 to 500 metres, put a seal in, then do another 400 to 500 metres and repeat the process all the way up.
And in fact, that was a Pike plan early on, wasn't it? Pike itself was talking about doing that.
Really, really early on. And then when the receivers took over and they put Steve Ellis in charge of the mine, now he was a guy that failed his mine manager's licence 3 times in Australia, came to New Zealand, and Doug White, who was the mine manager at Pike River and was his mate, passed his test. He passed it for him because Doug White had the power to do that. So he decided that the staged re-entry was not going to be no good. No, we can do it much quicker than that, he said. We can just do a straight walk-up. And, of course, that's when the problems really began, when they got away from that staged re-entry. And, you know, I'm going to use the government's words here. The staged re-entry, it's safe, it's credible, and it's financially feasible. So,
when did the government say that? You kept the minutes. When did the government say that?
They've said that all the way along. They've always said that if we could come up with a plan that was safe, credible, and financially feasible, and that's an accepted worldwide practice in mine recovery. And we've got the world experts in this field, and they're willing, able, and ready to do the job. So what's the hold-up? What's in that mine that they don't want us to see?
You've been saying this for years now, haven't you? Years, literally years.
Broken record, really, isn't it?
And there is a sense, I think sometimes people hear Pike families speaking and thinking, oh, here they go again. Why hasn't it happened? Have you been strung along?
Oh, no question. Absolutely no question. We really want to get to justice. And the government continues to tell us that it's not safe to re-enter the drift. But the footage clearly shows that it is safe to re-enter, and that footage shows that they've already done it. It's just from where the robot got to about 1,500 metres. It's just another 400 metres, just 400 metres from where the robot ended to the electrical switchgear, which is what the experts think will show what caused the explosion. So what's that all about?
What is it all about?
What is it all about? The whole thing, to me, it raises so many issues. For example, if they withheld that from the Royal Commission, then what else did they withhold?
They say they didn't withhold it.
They withheld that part of it. I mean, the commissioners and the QCs that were involved in the Royal Commission have all come out and said they have not seen that footage. You know, the Royal Commission underway, the police, I'm going to use Winston Peters' words here because I loved it when he said it the other day, the police were donkey deep in an investigation, a criminal investigation. And why didn't they go in and get the evidence that they needed? They had that footage there from the robot which showed that it was safe to go into the mine. Sure, it was safe to go in a nitrogen-filled part of the mine, and that's how they got the seal at 170 done. And that's what the staged re-entry is all about. Go in another 400 to 500 metres.
Do another seal.
Fill it with nitrogen, put another seal in.
Go further, fill it with nitrogen, put another sealant. Yeah.
Before you know it, you're at the end of the drift.
I'm just about to talk to the police about why the footage has come out. It came out last night. We're seeing it today. What's going on here? What would you like to say to them if you were able to talk to them?
Look, if I was able to talk to them, I'd say all we're asking you for is the information that you've got, that you've based your decision on, the decision to say that entering the mine is unsafe. If it is unsafe, then show us what you've got, because everything that we've seen and been told to date supports a safe re-entry.
Carol Rose, who took the minutes at the Pike River family meetings and whose son Stuart Mudge was killed in the mine. Now, the Police Deputy Commissioner for National Operations is Mike Clement. I asked him why it took an Official Information Act request for the footage to be released to the families of the dead men.
I should go back a step, actually, and say that right from the outset, the police have been well aware of the need to be prioritising the support for and meeting the expectations of family. And on reflection, I look back over that process because I wasn't involved directly with Pike River, and I think they've done a stunning job. I mean, if we haven't met expectation of some, then that's disappointing, because I can tell you from my review and reflections on what happened back then was that they worked extremely hard. And that includes, for instance, making sure that the families were aware on a day-by-day basis what was happening at the mine and what information they might be able to glean as a consequence of what was happening at the mine. And that included letting them know in advance where that was possible, what probes were going to be put into the mine and what videos and what robots were going to be deployed. So the family knew what was happening in advance, knew to expect that there would be these images and debriefs available. And in fact, throughout the process, we're seeing excerpts from that video right through the process up until and including at the time of the commission.
Look, this is such a strikingly different version of events, and I'm just bewildered by it. And so I want to put it on the table. We have spoken to family member after family member. We've spoken to lawyers. We've spoken to everyone we can talk to this week, and no one has seen that striking footage of the man walking along the drift, except for Daniel Rockhouse. He is the only person who's told us he has previously seen it. None of the rest. And I've lost count of how many people we've spoken to. So how can your version of events be so different from their version of events?
Well, with regard to that specific imagery, we're talking about imagery taken from a robot that was deployed on the 15th of March 2011. That's after the police handed over the ownership of the mine to the receivers. So that happened on the 9th. So the police were handed that video subsequent to the deployment of that robot. So we had possession of it. The family knew in advance it was going to be deployed, and were told after it was deployed that it had been deployed. And as a part of the process leading in commission of inquiry, and actually from the outset of the investigation in response to the explosion, they had seen excerpts from various images.
But they haven't seen an excerpt with a man walking up the drift. Now, he is wearing bog standard industry overalls. His hands are bare. He has on breathing apparatus, yes, but there seems to be no other concessions whatsoever to the dangers of the drift. Now, remember, there are 29 men somewhere further up beyond there, and the families have been repeatedly told the drift cannot be accessed because lives would be at risk.
Okay. Well, when we showed the family 8 hours of video on the 23rd and 24th of July 2011, there was 8 hours of video from various sources, not just the video taken on the 15th of March. And they saw minutes, not hours, because there's 13 hours of it, and they've already seen 8 hours. And in the images that they did see from the 15th of March, there was the robot. It was in what was referred to as the airlock, and it did feature mines rescue staff wearing protective equipment similar to what you've just described.
Yeah, looking in a container, looking like they're standing in a container of some description, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Some of those images were released.
Absolutely, but they weren't out in the drift. They weren't out in the drift. Now, look, you have worked your way up through the ranks, and you know from cross-examining people, sometimes it's the stuff you don't say that is as material as the stuff you do say. I just don't understand why you didn't show the families a man in the drift.
Well, from the point of view of the police, we, as I say, had been very transparent and very engaged with and meeting the expectations of the family. At the time when those images were available, bearing in mind that it was after a period after we'd handed over the ownership of the mine, the team that was stepping the families through the process of preparing them for the Commission of Inquiry and making sure that they were across as much of the detail as was reasonable to be across, that was the images that were shown. So I can't put myself back in that.
But this, look, and, absolutely, and you weren't even there at the time. You weren't even involved in it at the time.
But I'm not trying to.
I know, and you're fronting, and we appreciate it. But I can't stress strongly enough, and you must understand this, that it is material a man has been in the drift, because we are constantly told by Solid Energy and by the government that going into the drift is tantamount to some kind of death sentence. And this man has been in the drift and he is alive.
That's right. So I think it's important, and this is where it's difficult for me, because I can't speak for those that were in control of the mine at the time. But I understand, and you will understand too, probably having heard the same or seen the same release with regards to the conditions that existed in the mine when they deployed that robot. So I run the risk of misleading your listeners, because I'm not an expert in mines, and the police weren't in charge of the mine on the 15th of March 2011, but I understand the circumstances were such that the environment, the gases inside the mine at that time had been neutralised by virtue of the introduction of nitrogen and the sealing of the mine. So
and that's a statement of fact. You're quite right. That's a statement of fact. But the whole case for a progressive re-entry. So the people we've spoken to, and look, I can't have a mining conversation with you because you are a policeman and I'm a journalist, and neither of us really know anything about it. But the people we have spoken to say, here's what you do. You seal, you introduce nitrogen, you make the atmosphere safe, then you advance and do the same again, establishing beachhead after beachhead until you go as far as you can go. Now, the fact that this has happened, the fact that a man in pretty rudimentary clothing, bare hands, was able to do this and get out safely is material, isn't it? I just wonder, of all the shots the family should have seen, this seems to be at the top of the list.
Well, I accept that is the view of some. In July of 2011, when we had possession of that video, we played it, in a way that we considered to be open and transparent with the families, with no intent whatsoever to try and mislead them or deceive them.
Did Solid Energy, did someone from Pike River, in fact back then it was still Pike River, did Pike River, did the receiver, or did Solid Energy ask you, the police, at any stage, as far as you're aware, not to release these particular shots because it would compromise their case against re-entry?
No idea whatsoever that happened. I mean, if it happened, what I should say is, if it happened, I have no information.
Okay, and I accept that.
In fact, the opposite I would say is that everybody thought, and as I say, when I look back over the response of the staff that were involved in the day from a police perspective and across the organisation, my view of it is that everybody was trying to do exactly the opposite, was to be open and transparent. I accept that there are views held now that feel as though that wasn't the case. But I've spoken to the staff, many of them are in far-flung corners of the world now from a police perspective, and they're as upset as everybody that they're now being accused of deceiving the family members when their absolute intent, and then if nobody understands it, if anyone understands it better than the police, I'd be surprised how important it is to keep these people appraised.
Mike Clement, Police National Operations Deputy Commissioner. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Sun's royal photographer Arthur Edwards on Prince Philip and his retirement, and a call for health chiefs to do more to bolster Dunedin's fragile neurosurgery service. Don't forget, you can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. A really busy week for feedback, and we appreciate it. It's really good to hear from you. 5:24. Thank you for being with us. The government says the chances of banishing the new plant disease Myrtle rust from New Zealand are slim, but it says there is no choice but to try. The Ministers for Primary Industries and Conservation were in Kirikiri today to meet the nursery owners who spotted the fungus and blew the whistle. Lois Williams filed this report from Kirikiri.
We've just come for our first season's planting, and it's been a shock to see that the gate is closed.
Forlorn customers have been turned away today from the gates of Kirikiri plant production, where the dreaded myrtle rust was outed on Tuesday night by the alert owners, Tom and Julia Lindsay. Biosecurity staff in white overalls are now moving around their nursery, spraying fungicide and bagging vegetation. The sign on the gate says the nursery is closed for urgent inquiries and apologises for any inconvenience. Maria Manning, a loyal customer of many years, says the disease couldn't have picked less deserving hosts to land on.
Lovely people and very helpful and very knowledgeable, and they have a wonderful variety, and their dedication is very much to native plants, which we appreciate.
The confirmation that myrtle rust has made landfall in New Zealand's mainland has sparked a full-scale biosecurity operation in the small town. It's believed the fungal spores were blown over from Australia, where it's been killing native trees since 2010, or possibly from Raoul Island, where it was found on Pahutakawa in March. And those spores have the potential to wipe out or seriously damage other native trees, including manuka, along with feijoas and guavas. At DOC headquarters across the Pike River, the Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, says the ministry will have 100 staff working in the area within days.
We are out inspecting all of the nurseries in the Kirikiri area. Obviously there's an ongoing spraying program and lockdown at the particular nursery where the first find was. We've also got about 300 high-risk sites in Northland that DOC and MPI are monitoring. There's 800 including Auckland, so all of those are under regular monitoring as well.
Nathan Guy says the help of the gardening public in Kirikiri is going to be crucial in containing myrtle rust.
Our advice to anyone that's growing feijoas or has purchased any trees, particularly from the myrtle family, from this nursery or other nurseries in the Kirikiri region, that they please go out and inspect their trees. Any signs, any concerns that they have, that they may suspect it is myrtle rust, please take a photo and get hold of MPI.
The Conservation Minister, Maggie Barry, says DOC staff all over the north have put other work on hold to deal with the myrtle rust crisis. She says what people should look for is purple pustules on new leaves turning to a bright yellow rust. And she stresses it's not just native trees that are affected.
It is also common all garden plants, lily-pilly, which is used a lot, the eugenia for hedging. It is also feijoa, it's gum trees, most of the eucalypts. So these are, as well as that, the bottle brushes. So a lot of these are in flower and growing at the moment. So any new fresh growth is bound to be a magnet if there are spores and if this myrtle rust has spread.
The biggest loser if myrtle rust does take hold in New Zealand could be the $300 million manuka honey industry. The disease has taken 3 to 5 years to show up on tea tree plants in Australia, inhibiting growth and flowering. Nathan Guy concedes that MPI and DOC could be fighting a losing battle. He says there are 20 weather events a year of the sort that could blow the disease across the Tasman. But he says there's a chance that this time at least it could be stopped in its tracks, and New Zealand can't afford not to try. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Prince Philip is effectively retiring. At 95, he's had enough of public life anyway. The Palace's handling of this, summonsing staff from far and wide for an emergency meeting with no explanation as to why, led to a seriously bizarre few hours at this time last night. But it was the end of an era, not the end of a life. Philip and Elizabeth have been married for 70 years this year, and when she became Queen following her father's death in 1952, he became her consort. Opinions of him span a broad gamut. At one end of the spectrum, the Guardian's pretty tough take on him. If he were plain Mr. Philip Windsor, he would be seen as a tiresome old toff. At the other end, praise for the Duke of Edinburgh awards and for a life of public service with a smile, said the Telegraph's headline. The Sun has called him the Duke of Hazard, but seems to regard him as one might regard an elderly uncle given to saying whatever he wants to say. The more serious tributes will come, of course, but few people outside the palace have seen him as often as Arthur Edwards, the Sun's very famous photographer of the royals, 40 years in the job, 7 royal weddings, 4 funerals and 7 royal births. How does he describe Prince Philip?
Well, he's very gruff. He's very abrupt. He doesn't do small talk, and he's been an amazing consort, I suppose. I mean, the thing about Philip, Prince Philip, which I'm always seeing in my pictures, who's always standing behind the Queen. He's always been there for, 70, almost 70 years now. He's been the consul. I mean, they're 70 years married this year. And that in itself is just a great achievement. But many things, I was with him yesterday at Lord's when he opened the new pavilion. I was photographing the engagement. And as he walked down the steps of Lord's, like one of the, a couple of England openers, he was just effortless. No help, didn't have no balustrade. He just walked down there, got on with it briskly, and I was surprised when they made that announcement this morning, because one thing that struck me yesterday, that even though he's 96 next month, he's incredibly fit, a man incredibly fit for his age. He's, he's just unbelievable, which is, I suppose, quite amazing. It's amazing these days to see a man at that age just walking and just carrying on like he has all his life.
Arthur, that was a lovely phrase you used. I was with him yesterday. Are you with him when you take his photo, as you have done so many times over so many years? Really with him? Or does he just tolerate you?
He just tolerates everybody in the media. He knows that you've got a job to do. He's aware of that. But, he's just focused on what he's doing. Like yesterday, he was so happy because he's president of the MCC, and to go and open a new stand wasn't an engagement for him. It was a love. And talking to the old cricketers, Mike Gatting, he was talked to, and Angus Fraser, two famous English cricketers, and talking and holding different cricket bats. One Everton Weekes batted with at Lord's, and another one, David Gower, and he was chatting, and he was very full of knowledge. And I thought this morning, we now be able to go to Lord's, got a couple of test matches there this year, and sit there and just enjoy it and not have to worry about anything. Before, he'd have to go and shake hands with a visiting team, with the Queen, and it'd be, an engagement. But now he can just say, I'm going to the cricket today, love, and get in the car and go down there. And you know what? Good luck to him.
Yes. Do you think he would say love? I mean, would he say, I'm going to the cricket today, love? Would they talk to each other?
I think he would say
but right, behind closed doors.
Very affectionate. Well, I think they're very affectionate towards each other, I mean, it was the last overseas trip they did, which was 2011 to Australia. I remember that last day in Perth, and they were just going through this big, it was the Big Barbie, it was called, and it was the last engagement before they caught the plane home. And there was one picture I took, which he was giving her flowers. He got flowers from a child who'd missed seeing the Queen, and he brought them over to the Queen. And the look she gave him, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it was just, after all them years, it could still look at someone like that and feel, obviously this warmth pouring across this, in the middle of this huge, huge amount of people. There's just this one tender moment. And, he wouldn't think it was that, but it was that. And it was just lovely to see.
Arthur Edwards, 40 years taking photos of the Royals, many trips to New Zealand during that time, of course, with the Sun speaking to us earlier today. Coming up on Checkpoint, a jury has found Daycare supervisor Lynn Abraham guilty on 10 of 11 charges of assaulting children in her care. Our court reporter Edward Gay joins us immediately after Nona. And a row over plans for Auckland hoteliers to pay sharply higher rates appears to have worsened. We'll have more on that from Todd Nile, but before all of that, with the 5:33 and a bit headlines, here's Anna Thomas.
Thanks, John. The daycare supervisor and teacher accused of assaulting children has been found guilty of the majority of charges against her. Lynn Euphemia Abraham was cleared of an assault charge relating to sellotaping a child's mouth shut, but found guilty of the 10 other charges that included smacking and force feeding. The Crown says Abraham wasn't coping under stress and assaulted the children over 4 years. Seeds from the plant and tree species that could be affected by a deadly disease are being put into a seed bank as a precaution. The airborne fungal disease has been confirmed in young Puhutakawa in a kirikiri nursery, which has been quarantined. The pathogen can kill all members of the Myrtle family. That includes Puhutakawa, rata, manuka, eucalypts and feijoas. The police say they have acted transparently with the families of the 29 men who died in the Pike River mine disaster. Police today released 13 hours of footage taken inside the Pike River mine, some of which shows a robot and 2 workers inside the mine's access tunnel. They say they have not tried to mislead the families. The Auckland City Missioner says he's appalled that people sleeping rough are having sprinklers turned on them. Several inner city buildings, including a private school, use the automatic sprinklers to deter people from sleeping in their doorways. The Auckland City Missioner, Chris Farrelly, says he feels for the shop owners, but cruelty is not the answer to a complicated problem. People living on Vanuatu's northern islands are being told to stay indoors until tropical cyclone Donna passes. The Category 3 storm is already bringing heavy rain and high winds in Toba province, where a church and many houses have been destroyed. It comes less than a month after Cyclone Cook and 2 years after the Category 5 cyclone Pam, which caused widespread destruction. And that's the news.
Thanks, Anna. More and lots of those stories coming up. But let's turn to business news first with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. The country's third largest rest home operator, Oceania Healthcare, has debuted on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. How did it go?
It did. Well, actually pretty good. There was a good turnout. There were the bell ringing. It's been a while since we'd heard that at the NZX, so it was kind of exciting. The share price was issued at 79 cents, opened at 82 cents, finished the day actually at it traded as high as 83 cents, closed at 79. So it closed basically where the issue price was. But that really reflects the market overall. Our market was a little changed. Asia's a bit down at the moment. Commodity prices have kind of sunk optimism on the global economy. So our NZX top 50 index ended down almost 0.2%, 13 points at 7,366. The dollar was little changed, and it was, again, has a bit of a soft tone to it. 68.7 US cents, 93.1 Australian, and 53.1 British pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you for a very good week of covering business news for us. We really appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend.
And you.
Nona's going to exit the studio and Edward Gay is going to join us from the court, but lots of feedback coming in on Pike. Why would the families lie, asked Diana. Absolutely deplorable that the government and government agencies keep up the spin on how hard they've tried to keep the families informed. Time to stop it. Give those families peace. Ken says, I believe the only reason a broke government-funded company bought the Pike mine was to be able to disaster manage and cover up at the expense of the families who lost loved ones. And another Diana says, I absolutely believe the paperwork shows police did everything right, but paperwork isn't always reality. Thank you for all of your feedback. We appreciate it. Let's go to Edward Gay, who has moved into the seat vacated only seconds ago by Nona Peltier. Lynn Abraham, you've been in here a few nights this weekend. We're talking about this case. So she was charged, 11 charges of assaulting children. Her care found guilty of how many?
Of 10, John. And, I mean, we heard at trial from 3 of her former colleagues, and they detailed evidence against Abraham, that she smacked children on the hand and that she force-fed others. But none of them blew the whistle, and despite some of the allegations dating back to 2012. Now,
Yes, that's an interesting thing. So they sat in court this week and they were strong witnesses, right?
They were. They were.
Okay, but they didn't blow the whistle at the time.
They didn't go to authorities at the time, and it actually took a part-time special needs teacher employed by the Ministry of Education to alert police and Child, Youth and Family. Now, just why the 3 teachers kept quiet wasn't actually answered at trial, although one of the teachers, Ines Miranda, was asked why she didn't raise her concerns with Abraham. She told the court that she wasn't a qualified teacher, that Abraham was the manager, her senior, and she felt that Abraham must know what she was doing. RNZ News has sought comment from the Ministry of Education about what training was in place for early childhood teachers and if they were looking into this issue. We haven't heard back from them.
Right, very good point, because if someone early on after incident 1 had said, oi, this is out of order, then there wouldn't have been a trial in district court this week, right?
Exactly.
OK, what was the one charge that Lynn Abraham was cleared of?
She was cleared of this charge of sellotaping a child's mouth shut, and this child had, according to the evidence we heard in court, had been noisy. Abraham told him to be quiet. She then went away, threatened the child with sellotape, came back with the sellotape, and then the teacher, her colleague, later saw this child with sellotape on his mouth. Now, the jury actually cleared her of that charge. All other 10, though, they came back guilty. That they are the smacking of the hand, the force feeding, the washing another child's mouth out with soap.
Yeah, that's right.
Who had been swearing at a teacher. So that's the mix. 10 guilty, 1 not guilty.
How long was the jury out for, Eddie?
They went out at 11:45 and they came back roughly 5:45.
So pretty quick for 11 charges.
Yeah, I suppose so.
What happens now?
Well, there's Judge June Jealous. She has ordered reports for restorative justice. So there's a possibility that Abraham may sit down with the families of these children. Incidentally, one of the families of these children actually gave evidence in her defence. The father and mother both came along to court. They both gave evidence in Abraham's favour, saying that Abraham was invited to the children's birthday parties and things. So, well, we don't know what that restorative justice conference could entail. But the other parents, they'll also be offered this chance. That could be taken into account at sentencing, and that sentencing will take place in July in the Waitakere District Court, because that's where Judge June Jealous will be sitting. Abraham's on bail until then, and outside court she had nothing to say to the media.
Eddie Gay, who's covered this, Edward Gay, who's covered this all week. Thanks so much. Guilty on 10 of 11 charges. Thanks, Eddie. We really appreciate it. Let's turn now to the row over plans for Auckland tourist accommodation providers to pay sharply higher rates. Well, it appears to have worsened. Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff today unveiled a fine-tuned version of his controversial $28 million tax on hotels, motels and campgrounds. But as our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile reports, that immediately sparked new warnings of legal action.
Phil Goff wants his council to raise more money to pay for new infrastructure, and he thinks accommodation providers rather than ratepayers should foot the bill by paying an extra rate based on the capital value of their property. After a heated pushback from the tourism industry, he's lowered his sights, but still wants visitors to pay more.
I haven't heard a visitor yet come to Auckland City that's complained that their bed rate might go up by $4 to $8, but I have heard a lot complain that it took them an hour and a half to get from the airport to their hotel in the CBD.
Mr Goff now proposes 3 rating zones radiating out from the city centre. Central city hotels would pay 1/3 less than under his original plan. Those further out and motels would pay up to 80% less. Those on the rural fringe, along with backpackers and camping grounds, are excluded. The impact is still significant, and it's hoped to raise between $15 and $18 million, down from the original $28. One central city hotel would see its $600,000 rate bill double to $1.2 million a year. Stamford Land Corporation's Operations Director, Kieron Handy, says that extra cost can't just go onto the room rate.
That's going to be squeezing our less employees or less produce. You know, we spend $15 million a year on local produce and services and staff and everything else in Auckland. You know, that's going to reduce dramatically because we're going to have to get tighter in order for us to recuperate the $1 million that we're going to spend on the additional proposed targeted rate that he's putting through.
Phil Goff says the hotels can afford it.
They are making profits on an unprecedented level and will continue to do so, in my opinion. We're just asking that they plough a little bit of that profit back to enable us to meet the infrastructure needs of the city that is starting to groan under the pressure that extra tourists in the city is adding.
The accommodation industry argues it gets only 10% of the tourism spend, yet it will foot the entire bill. Mr Goff's new plan doesn't yet extend to private properties offered through businesses such as Airbnb. He hopes to include hotel-style properties that are permanently hired out by their owners through Airbnb next year.
They will be expected to pay the same rate, and we've had negotiations with them around that, where they are doing exactly the same things that hotels do. But will I go household by household searching out the casual person that's staying on Airbnb? No, that's not the right thing to do, and the administrative costs would outweigh the benefit from doing so.
Chris Roberts, the Chief Executive of tourism industry Aotearoa, is unimpressed with the varying rate levels and the exemptions.
On the face of it, it's only really succeeded in making the proposal even more inequitable.
And Mr Roberts says the revised proposal is even more likely to prompt a legal challenge than the original version.
We know that a number of the major property owners have already consulted lawyers, have legal advice in place already, and have been told by their legal advisors that there's a very strong case to legally challenge this rate because it simply doesn't meet the requirements of the Local Government Act.
Phil Goff says the revision hasn't been done simply to garner support from enough councillors to get the measure passed. It's not clear yet whether the Mayor has the numbers for his biggest fiscal initiative since taking office. Several councillors spoken to by RNZ News were undecided. There's 4 weeks until the vote. I tamaki makoro mo te hotaka o te ahi ko Todd Nile tēnei.
We turn now to the story of the Scottish surfer Matthew Bryce, who made headlines early this week with his incredible tale of survival. The 22-year-old from Glasgow spent more than 30 hours clinging to his board before being rescued far out in the Irish Sea. He's still in hospital, but the BBC's Chris Butler spoke to him about his ordeal.
By the night time, it wasn't just the shoulder and leg, it was all my limbs were cramping.
Matthew Bryce is exhausted, sunburnt and still recovering. But he's just thankful to have survived after drifting alone in the Irish Sea for more than 30 hours.
The current changes and I can't do anything. And all this time the wind's pushing me further and further and further out. And then night fell.
He ended up clinging to his surfboard in the middle of the Irish Sea for a day and a half. He was eventually found halfway between Northern Ireland and Scotland, just as the sun was setting and a second night was approaching.
I was pretty certain that I was going to die if that sunset. So I was watching the sunset. I'd pretty much made peace with it all. And then I heard a helicopter. And the helicopter flew right over. So I jumped off the board and I lifted the board up. And I started waving the board, and they flew right over, and I thought they'd missed me. And then they turned, and they turned round, and they saved my life.
The moment he was rescued from the water, and his family could finally be told that he was alive.
You have this elation, and then 20 minutes later, you crash back down. You don't know what state he's in. You don't know how unwell he is, and until we got that phone call from Matthew, just to hear his voice.
The search teams even managed to recover his surfboard. Are you looking forward to being reunited with your surfboard? Is that the right question?
I think we'll find a good use for it. Maybe a starter fuel. But yeah.
That's it, you're done with surfing?
I think so. I couldn't do that again.
And that pledge to keep away from the surf is one his family seem determined to make him keep.
Chris Butler with that report. Otago Southland is back to just one neurosurgeon, and there are calls for health chiefs to do more to bolster Dunedin's fragile neurosurgery service. 10,000 residents took to the streets in 2010 to keep the service in Dunedin rather than relocating it north to Christchurch. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
Neurosurgery is a hot topic in Dunedin, where residents insisted it be retained at Dunedin Hospital in spite of recruitment and retention hurdles. But neurosurgeon Dirk de Ridder has quit clinical work in Dunedin, keeping his Otago University-based research, and that, along with 2 other departures, has left just one neurosurgeon, well-regarded Ahmad Taha. That's only workable with help from visiting neurosurgeons from Canterbury, Wellington and Hamilton. The Southern District Health Ward's Chief Medical Officer, Nigel Miller, says it's not ideal, but they're managing.
It's a little bit tricky, but obviously we could see this coming because there's been a bit of warning of this situation arising. So there's been a lot of planning. and we've got great support from around the country.
Dr. Miller says the situation's disappointing after all the effort that's gone in over years.
However, we've got a good way forward working with the university, who've been very helpful and supportive, and we're now looking to appoint 2 people who will work part-time for the university and part-time for the Southern District Health Board, which will give us a good continuing service.
The Health Ministry ended deep divisions in 2010 over where and how services should be delivered by deciding they should come from both Christchurch and Dunedin rather than Christchurch alone. Labour's health spokesperson, Dunedin North MP David Clark, says both the government and the Southern DHB need to ensure this works. He believes there have been differences between the 2 South Island neurosurgery centres.
The fact that the Christchurch end of things are not particularly cooperative is the story that's been told through the DHB, that it's been a struggle to attract suitable neurosurgeons who are reluctant to go into a position where they are not guaranteed a certain number of patients to keep their skills up.
He says this hasn't helped Dunedin.
In order for them to receive a credible amount of casework, there needs to be transfers in both directions, not just patients being transferred to Canterbury. There also needs to be a willingness on the part of the Canterbury surgeons to make rosters work and to share workloads.
The DHB's Dr Nigel Miller says he's seen no signs of that.
I think there's been a good working relationship. I've had quite a number of conversations with the Canterbury people and found them very supportive.
The Southern DHB says it has a roster of visiting neurosurgeons to support Mr Taha, and it'll provide cover for the rest of the year. The Dean of the Otago University Medical School, Peter Crampton, says it'll find 2 new academic neurosurgeons.
We're in discussions with a highly suitable candidate right now. I don't expect those discussions to come to a landing point for probably another 3-4+ weeks.
He says the latest difficulty doesn't mean the rescue plan is deficient.
The model certainly can be made to work well, and it was working well there while we had all hands on deck. 2 of those people have moved on from their clinical roles, which is unfortunate.
RNZ News asked the Canterbury DHB for comment, but no one was made available for an interview by the deadline. For Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
Some sport now. Joseph Parker says despite being familiar with Razvan Korjanu's game, he's ready for him. The Romanian boxer, ranked 14th in the world by the WBO, was Parker's main sparring partner in Las Vegas as he prepared to fight Hughie Fury. Little did either of them know at the time that once Fury's team pulled out just 10 days ago, they would end up fighting each other.
Leading up to the fight is quite hard, preparing for Fury and he pulling out, then looking at the top 15, and Razvan was the only one that was available and willing to come down to fight May 6th. So it is a little difficult, but it is boxing business. Outside of the ring, we can respect each other, and we know how each other is. But in the ring, it's all about taking care of business and trying our best to knock each other out.
And you've got to win this because of what Anthony Joshua did, right? So you actually, Joseph, you have to win it, and you have to win it really impressively, don't you?
Yeah, I have to put on a sort of dominant performance where people can look at it and say, "Hey, Joseph does belong at the top level." But I'm not going to go out there and try and prove myself to everyone. I'm going to try and prove myself to myself, and I want to put on a great performance for myself. And I know that I'm ready. I've been training real hard, and Razvan is a great fighter and a great person. But I'm going to go in there and take care of business. I want to keep this WBO belt here in New Zealand and Samoa, and I want to defend it as many times as I can.
Hughie Fury, he seems to be recovering from his injury. There must be moments where you just put your head in your hands, Joseph, as you was listening to the nonsense coming out of his camp.
Oh, it's very hard to deal with that camp. To be honest, it's the hardest to deal with in my whole career. But I guess you got to face those kind of things in boxing. I don't know about his back injury is questionable. If he is injured, I wish him a fast recovery. But it's one of those things where you got to accept the changes that come to you in every situation and try and adapt to it as best you can.
Joseph, you are a really nice man.
Oh, thank you.
I
try to be.
Well, you are. And I just wonder what the hell you're doing in boxing. It's full of rats and snakes and, if Hughie Fury had a back injury that prevented him from fighting you, I'm Muhammad Ali.
The thing about you gotta have people in boxing who are good and people who are bad. But the fight that happened last week was a perfect example of 2 nice guys getting in the ring, doing
good call.
Also showing a lot of respect.
That's right. And actually, it was a fine advertisement for boxing, right?
It was great. It was great for boxing and it was great for the heavyweight division. So it was good for myself to watch it as a fan, but also as someone who's studying them for future fights.
Yeah. You reckon you can beat Anthony Joshua?
I back myself against anyone in the world, and I believe I could beat him. I know he's got a lot of strengths. You know, he's powerful, he's big, he's a champion for a reason. But I know I can back myself with any heavyweight you put me in the ring with, and because that's because of the work that I do in the gym. You know, I train hard, and I believe in the ability that I have in the ring.
You have to train hard. It's all about the training, because you had 5 fights last year, if I recall correctly, but this is your first fight this year. Yeah. And so the intensity required in your training to keep you at peak level, to keep you fit, when there is such a long time between drinks, is really high, isn't it?
Oh, it's very intense, and you got to train hard. And then when you do train hard, it's like the training is the hardest part of the fight. Once you get in the ring, it's about enjoying yourself. It's like a reward for all the hard work you've been doing. But it is intense. You know, it's training 3 times a day, 6 days a week, and the body does go through a lot. But I guess I enjoy it. I enjoy it, even though it hurts.
3 times a day, six days a week, even when there's no fight on the calendar.
Even when there's no fight, you're still doing a bit here and there. You got to keep in shape, because if you go out of shape, it's hard to get in shape.
Now we've got a question from a fan here, a very good fan, and he says, Deontay Wilder keeps calling you out, saying he wants to fight you. Are you hearing that noise? Deontay's he's a noisy character. Are you hearing it?
Of course I am. You know, I'm in the position now where people are starting to call me out, and a guy like Deontay Wilder, who I respect a lot, he's a great champion himself, and hopefully I take care of business with this weekend, and then I can sit down and talk to all these guys. I'll fight any of these guys.
Are you loving it?
I'm loving it. I love the journey. I love the training. I love the boxing. I love the rewards that come with it. I love looking after my family. I'm enjoying life.
Joseph Parker. Internal flights in Vanuatu have been suspended as the country braces itself for the as yet unknown impact of Cyclone Donna. A short time ago, I spoke to UNICEF's Andrew Parker in the capital Port Vila and asked him via Skype video about the damage Donna may bring.
From what we see from the Vanuatu Meteorological Organisation and from the various tracking sites, she's developed and crossed the north of Vanuatu, the very north, the Torres, the small islands that don't have much to them in terms of height, and she's sort of tracking down to the west at the moment. We don't know what she's going to do from then on, but she's certainly threatening at the moment.
Any reports coming in from areas of habitation?
Not that I've heard. We expect the National Disaster Management Office to give everybody a full brief on that at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. They may come out with some stuff earlier than that today. The population up there is pretty sparse, and communications up there are extremely difficult.
Okay. To what extent is this insult to injury after Pam? In other words, is Donna going to hit areas that that have yet to recover from Pam?
The wonderful thing about cyclones is you never know what they're going to do. Cyclone Winston actually came and looked at us twice last year. So we hope that Donna has done the damage that she's going to do, and she's going to waft off and disappear. The models do, though, sort of suggest that she may loop back down to the southeast and may actually end up skirting Port Vila and hitting Te Whea again, though certainly the models at this stage suggest that she will have weakened considerably by that stage. We're talking Monday, Tuesday next week, potentially.
Body cameras have been just the ticket for parking wardens in Dunedin. The cameras have recorded 18 incidents of abuse or violence since they were introduced a month ago, and the parking wardens themselves say they've been a deterrent for motorists thinking of kicking up a fuss. Here's our Otago South reporter Lydia Anderson.
Parking wardens cop a lot of abuse, but now that the abuse is being caught on camera, ticketed drivers are thinking twice about venting their anger. Wardens can activate the body cameras if they sense a situation is growing tense. Dunedin Warden Bevan Mears says just the act of pushing the record button can stop threatening behaviour in its tracks.
Some of the officers have had people start up at them, and they've seen the cameras and they've totally switched, done a complete 180 and turned from being aggressive, abusive to nice as pie.
Mr Mears has been a parking officer for 12 years, and while he loves the job, he says it does have a downside.
I was physically assaulted. I was chest butted last year. That's the only thing I've had in 12 years. I was sort of writing a ticket and the guy just come up and used his chest and whacked me in the shoulder, and so that's the sort of thing, it's all on camera.
But for the most part, he says, the Dunedin public are well behaved.
They are good. It's just they might be having a bad day or something, and then you come along and they see you putting a ticket on the car and they decide it's time to vent. So they use us to vent on. It's just part of the job.
The council's parking services team leader Peter Hanlon says the cameras aren't cheap, with a price tag of up to $1,700 a pop, but kitting out the council's 10 wardens has been worth it.
What it does is it gives the officers some confidence that they've got something to back them up and assist them with getting their point of view across. So if they've had a negative interaction on the street and they've got the video footage to support it, even if it's just a means of saying this is what's happened and we can talk through it, it may be that we don't need to rely on that footage and it will be deleted.
Peter Hanlon says the wardens have activated their cameras 18 times and 2 incidents have been referred to the police, including one where a warden sustained minor injuries. While he can't discuss those incidents, he says having the cameras certainly makes them easier to report.
So any incident of that nature would still be reported to the police. However, the cameras are a great tool because they help support what we're trying to describe to the police. So as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is the case with having the cameras.
Lydia Anderson, it's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. A daycare supervisor and teacher accused of assaulting children in her care has been found guilty on the majority of the charges. Lynn Abraham was accused of smacking, force-feeding children and taping a 4-year-old's mouth closed. Tom Furley reports.
The Crown's case was that Ms Abraham wasn't coping under the stress and assaulted the children. 3 of her colleagues told the court they saw her assault the children over 4 years at Bright Minds Childcare Centre in St John's. Ms Abraham denied that, saying she taped the hands of children to stop them snatching toys or throwing food, but did not smack. This afternoon, the jury has cleared her of the assault charge relating to sellotaping a child's mouth shut, but has found her guilty on 10 other charges. She will be sentenced in July. This is Tom Furley.
A biosecurity operation in Kirikiri is being ramped up after the discovery of the killer plant disease Myrtle rust in a local nursery. The fungal disease could seriously damage native trees, including Pohutukawa and Manuka, and some fruit trees. Lois Williams reports.
The Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, says MPI and DOC will have 100 people working in Kirikiri within days in a bid to stop myrtle rust taking hold. It's thought the spores of the disease blew over from Australia, and biosecurity staff have quarantined the affected nursery. They'll be checking trees within a 500-metre radius and spraying vulnerable species with fungicide. The Conservation Minister, Maggie Barry, says there's no sign of the bright yellow rust in local native forests so far, but she's urging home gardeners to check any myrtle species, including feedjowers, and to call MPI if they find any disease. This is Lois Williams.
The Police Deputy Commissioner of National Operations, Mike Clement, says they have acted transparently with the families of the 29 men who died in the Pike River mine disaster. The police today released 13 hours of footage taken by a robot inside the Pike River mine, some of which shows the robot and 2 workers inside the mine's access tunnel. The public release of the material comes after it was leaked to some of the victims' families, who claim the police did not show it to them. They say the video is significant as it proves the mine's main entry tunnel is safe to search for bodies and evidence, which the mine's owner disputes. Mike Clement says police have not tried to mislead the families.
When I look back over the response of the staff that were involved in the day from a police perspective and across the organisation, my view of it is that everybody was trying to do exactly the opposite, was to be open and transparent.
Mike Clement says excerpts from the video were shown at family meetings in 2011. People living on Vanuatu's northern islands are being told to stay indoors until tropical cyclone Donna passes over the country. The Category 3 storm is already bringing heavy rain and high winds in Torba province, where a church and many houses have been destroyed. Neville Coop from the Nandranki Weather Service says people should heed warnings over the next 24 to 48 hours.
probably will stay a Category 3 or a very weak Category 4, which would take it up to about 170 kilometres per hour sustained wind. So it's going to be nasty. The winds are going to be destructive. Not a Pam, but at least the intensity of Cook and perhaps a little stronger.
Neville Coop says the cyclone is moving slowly west. It comes less than a month after Cyclone Cook and 2 years after the Category 5 Cyclone Pam, which caused widespread destruction. It's believed the board of Māori Television is in negotiations with its CEO, Paul Maxwell, for his release. RNZ has been told negotiations are underway for Mr Maxwell's departure. The board apparently are not happy with a number of things, including the move to South Auckland, which has left staff uncertain. Mr Maxwell has been at the helm of the TV station for the past 3 years. Staff petitioned the board not to appoint him in the first place. A union representing bus drivers in Wellington says its members have been effectively shut out of a process determining their working conditions. The Regional Council today announced it preferred Masterton-based Transit Group to take on 8 contracts in Wellington, while Userbus from Palmerston North are likely to take on 1 contract in Kapiti. The National President for the Council of Trade Unions, Richard Wagstaff, says there are concerns Transit and Userbus do not offer good wages for bus drivers. He says the Regional Council refused to bind tender winners to keep drivers on their previous contracts. It's 6:05. The Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd says underestimating the Stormers ahead of tonight's Super Rugby match would be stupid. Both the Crusaders and Highlanders scored over 50 points against the Stormers in recent weeks, but Boyd expects a lot of resolve from the South Africans tonight in Wellington.
The Stormers are probably one of the proudest provinces in South Africa. They'll be hurting around those 2 results. You guys will be writing them off. We certainly won't be. I mean, they're a genuine challenge for us, and we're preparing to go to battle.
Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd. Kick-off is at 7:30. He hasn't played a test for 2 years, but plenty is expected of former captain Kieran Foran on his return to the Kiwis for tonight's Rugby League test against Australia in Canberra. Not since Foran helped New Zealand to a 3rd successive win over the Kangaroos in his last test in 2015. The Kiwis toppled their trans-Tasman counterparts, having lost their last 4 encounters. However, Foran's return to the NRL has the Kangaroos wary. Also returning for the Kiwis are Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and Simon Mannering from injury. Kick-off is at 10 o'clock. Meanwhile, the Sydney Roosters and Kiwis Rugby League outside back Sean Kenny-Dowell has been charged with drug possession after he was allegedly caught with cocaine at a Sydney nightclub. Kenny-Dowell was last year acquitted of domestic violence after he was accused of headbutting and pushing his former girlfriend. Kenny-Dowell wasn't picked in the Kiwi squad for tonight's test. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, a sport of fantasy. Frances Harding creates strange yet familiar worlds in her award-winning children's novels. Neil Stephenson's speculative fiction is grounded in science. So what would happen if the moon exploded? And then there's Lord, living that fantasy. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For all of the North Island, mainly fine, apart from a few showers about Mahia Peninsula and coastal Gisborne. For Nelson, Buller and Westland, areas of cloud tomorrow with isolated afternoon and evening showers in Buller and northern Westland. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, fine with frosts tomorrow morning. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, a few light showers about the south coast, mainly fine elsewhere. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. RNZ National, it's 6:07. You're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's been wonderful having you with us this week.
Thank you.
Anna Thomas, who has been our excellent newsreader this week in the absence of Katrina Batten. Thanks, Anna, and have a great weekend. We're going to return now to Pike River and the police releasing over 13 hours of video footage taken by a robot inside the Pike River Drift in March 2011. It's been a long time coming. Requested repeatedly by family members, including under the Official Information Act. Its official release comes just days after it was obtained by the media, who'd already made some of it public. This week there's been a sharp divide between families and the police and the government over who had previously seen what. But it does seem a shot the family hadn't seen is a serious omission. It shows a worker inside the drift. The families have repeatedly asked for mines rescue personnel who have volunteered for the job to be able to enter the drift to look for bodies and information about the cause of the explosion. But they've been repeatedly told it is simply too dangerous. Carol Rose, who's taken the minutes at Pike family meetings and whose son died in the mine, says a man working in the drift only 3 months after the explosion is something they should have been shown.
We really want to get to justice. And the government continues to tell us that it's not safe to re-enter the drift. But the footage clearly shows that it is safe to re-enter, and that footage shows that they've already done it. It's just, from where the robot got to about 1,500 metres. It's just another 400 metres, just 400 metres from where the robot ended to the electrical switchgear, which is what the experts think will show what caused the explosion. So what's that all about?
What is it all about?
What is it all about? The whole thing, to me, it raises so many issues. For example, if they withheld that from the Royal Commission, then what else did they withhold?
They say they didn't withhold it.
They withheld that part of it. I mean, the commissioners and the QCs that were involved in the Royal Commission have all come out and said they have not seen that footage. You know, the Royal Commission underway, the police, I'm going to use Winston Peters' words here because I loved it when he said it the other day, the police were donkey deep in an investigation, a criminal investigation. And why didn't they go in and get the evidence that they needed? They had that footage there from the robot which showed that it was safe to go into the mine.
Carol Rose, who's taken the minutes at Pike family meetings and whose son died in the mine, says a man working in the drift is something they should have been shown. The full interview with Carol Rose is online. The Police Deputy Commissioner for National Operations is Mike Clement. We also spoke to him earlier. He wasn't in charge at the time but maintains the police have acted with transparency.
I run the risk of misleading your listeners because I'm not an expert in mines, and the police weren't in charge of the mine on the 15th of March 2011, but I understand the circumstances were such that the environment, the gases inside the mine at that time had been neutralised by virtue of the introduction of nitrogen and the sealing of the mine. So
and that's a statement of fact. No, you're quite right. That's a statement of fact. But the whole case for a progressive re-entry. So the people we've spoken to, and look, I can't have a mining conversation with you because you are a policeman and I'm a journalist and neither of us really know anything about it. But the people we have spoken to say, here's what you do. You seal, you introduce nitrogen, you make the atmosphere safe, then you advance and do the same again, establishing beachhead after beachhead until you go as far as you can go. Now, the fact that this has happened, the fact that a man in pretty rudimentary clothing, bare hands, was able to do this and get out safely is material, isn't it? I just wonder, of all the shots the family should have seen, this seems to be at the top of the list.
Well, I accept that is the view of some. In July of 2011, when we had possession of that video, we played it, in a way that we considered to be open and transparent with the families, with no intent whatsoever to try and mislead them or deceive them.
Did Solid Energy, did someone from Pike River, in fact back then it was still Pike River, did Pike River, did the receiver, or did Solid Energy ask you, the police, at any stage, as far as you're aware, not to release these particular shots because it would compromise their case against re-entry?
No idea whatsoever that happened. I mean, if it happened, what I should say is, if it happened, I have no information.
Okay, and I accept that.
In fact, the opposite I would say is that everybody thought, and as I say, when I look back over the response of the staff that were involved in the day from a police perspective and across the organisation, my view of it is that everybody was trying to do exactly the opposite, was to be open and transparent. I accept that there are views held now that feel as though that wasn't the case.
Deputy Commissioner Mike Clements. Now, we spoke to both Mike and Carol Rose at length earlier in the program. Both those interviews are online. Sprinkler systems used to deter homeless people from sleeping in doorways of businesses in Auckland CBD have been described as treating the homeless like animals. Several inner city buildings, including a private school, are using the sprinklers, and while they say staff and residents are sick of cleaning up faeces, vomit and urine from their doorways, others say using sprinklers is hostile and cruel. Our reporter Eva Corlett spoke with Bruno, who sleeps rough downtown.
There's a couple of sprinkler systems around town but it's to stop people sleeping in the doorways. I think for fire exits like this, people leaving buildings if there's a fire and stuff like that, they put them in, yeah.
And so, have you ever been drenched by one?
Yep, not fully drenched because I'm fast, but I have been wet by one. There's one around the corner in that alleyway, just if you go down there on the left, there's the big one there is, so, yeah.
Wow, I mean, what do you think about them, or what do people that you know think about them?
Wow. Well, it's a homeless problem. They used to have a shelter for homeless people to go and sleep, and they took it away. So what do they do?
Bruno says those who live on the central city streets don't cause problems.
Most of the streeties I know that are on the street are good, and there's a lot of out-of-town ones that come in here that cause shit. Because all the street kids I know that are around town, they don't break into cars or they don't rob any businesses or nothing like that, you know what I mean?
Bruno says the government and the council need to work together to make the city safe for rough sleepers. A barista at a downtown cafe, Portia Cook, says rough sleepers appear now and then around the entrance of the cafe. But Ms Cook says businesses should talk to the homeless rather than douse them with water.
Having a sprinkler system to deter them, that's just treating them like animals. It's like spraying a dog with water in the face because he did something wrong. They are human beings. You should go out and talk to them and have a discussion with them and just say, hey, it's all good for you to be here, but just respect it a little bit, or maybe do certain things that you're doing elsewhere and then come back.
Ms Cook says discouraging a rough sleeper from one area is only going to push them into another. She says money invested in sprinklers would be better spent finding homes for those who need them. Auckland City Missioner Chris Farrelly says the practice is appalling and hostile, especially as the nights are getting colder. He says he feels for the shop owners, but the problem is complicated and being cruel is not the answer.
We know that there's a story behind every one of these people, a tragic story generally, and again, we're just devastated that people could think of throwing water on them.
Mr Farrelly wants to work with Auckland Council and downtown businesses and apartments to come up with another plan.
Until we can say that we have in place safe, warm, dignified shelter for our homeless, we just cannot consider or tolerate such hostile actions against the homeless.
An Auckland councillor, Linda Cooper, says the issue is complicated because the sprinklers are on private property. She says council staff that have tried to move homeless people on have sometimes been assaulted. Ms Cooper says though it's not nice to be doused in water, she understands why business owners take matters into their own hands.
I really feel for people who are coming to work in the morning. They're having to pick up rubbish, they're having to clean away, unpleasant bits of excrement. It's not nice to have to come to your work and have to do that, and it's not nice to be abused when you ask people to move on so your customers can come in.
The council is reviewing its public nuisance bylaw, and Ms Cooper says the new draft could include tougher measures to deal with street sleepers. A tāmaki makaura mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Corlett tēnei.
It's been a big week for feedback and we really appreciate it. This is quite a long email from Steve Gittings, but we're going to read it out. Hi Checkpoint team, Pike River. I listened to the police spokesman and frankly am disturbed. This is the interview we played after 5 o'clock. What he has confirmed is that footage that was shown to the families and to the Commission was edited. You will know full well that the process to edit a footage requires a person to decide what stays in and what is cut out, and editing can and does completely change the nature of footage. It's beyond belief that any independent, balanced, fair-minded editor would consider the footage that has now come to light of men in the drift was irrelevant, so should be cut from the footage initially released. Clearly someone decided to cut the footage, and we now need to know who edited the original footage and what basis did they use to make their editing decisions. Was there any communication between parties from Pike River, Solid Energy, government or police hierarchy and the editor on those decisions? Were the families and the Commission formally advised that the footage had been significantly edited? If so, were the families, the Commission and other interested parties ever given the opportunity to view the full unedited footage? Clearly a major issue of non-disclosure, or what might better be referred to as not providing full discovery of evidence in a legal process. Very concerning. Steve. Thank you, Steve. Yes, all of this is unfolding, and next week we will talk to lawyers about who was responsible for the provision of the footage and who made those decisions around editing. Thank you for all your feedback this week, by the way. Let's go to Wellington, where an outsider has won the right to operate most bus routes in the capital, but drivers in the city are in the dark about what it means for their jobs. Now, Masterton-based Transit Group has been nominated as the preferred tenderer for 8 contracts in Wellington, while Userbus from Palmerston North is likely to take 1 contract covering Kapiti. Jacob McSweeney reports.
Negotiations are underway between the Regional Council and their preferred tenderers, with a final decision likely next month. The chair of the Regional Council, Chris Laidlaw, says it was Transit Group's promise to build 228 Euro 6 low-emission diesel vehicles, which convinced councillors they were the best option.
While it'll be diesel, it will result in the short run, a 38% reduction in emissions. That is a really quite substantial shift. None of the other tenders came anywhere close to that.
He says there is a clear understanding Transit will pick up drivers from tenderers such as NZ Bus and Mana that had unsuccessful bids. NZ Bus goes from operating 73% of buses in the capital to just 28%. Mana goes from 25% control to 5%. Mr Laidlaw says Transit has a solid employment record and drivers will not have their wages cut.
They stacked up extremely well in terms of economies of scale. They're a family-owned company. They are a big company and they have a lot of resources and they are a very efficient company. So they've managed to extract efficiencies that it would seem some of the other tenders were unable to do. That's why their price is more competitive.
But the National President for the Council of Trade Unions, Richard Wagstaff, says there are concerns Transit and Userbus do not offer good wages for bus drivers. He says in a tender like this one, bus drivers have been cut out of a process where their conditions of work are being set.
Really keeps workers disempowered and in the dark and results in an exercise which has become all too cynical. One where there's large-scale restructuring, resulting in cuts in jobs, cuts in pay and massive consultancy packages, and that's exactly what it looks like we've got again here in Wellington.
Richard Wagstaff says bus drivers are left in the dark because the council refused to bind tender winners to keeping drivers on their previous contracts.
That was a choice the council has made for train operators. That's a choice that they were invited to make in setting this tender, but they refused to, though being asked over and over by the union movement and the Tramways Union.
Elsewhere, a spokesperson at the Tramways and Public Transport Union says it's well known there are no union members working at Transit because it is an extremely anti-union company. He says the union has 2 sentences in its contracts about working conditions, which largely say drivers will work whatever hours they are required to, and if there's no work, they won't be paid. Transit's managing director, Paul Snellgrove's grandfather, started the company in 1924 and says he's rapt to win such a lucrative contract. He says his company will take on 380 new drivers and they are likely to get pay rises.
We do not pay low wages to our drivers. We have a lot of drivers been with us 25, 30 years. The drivers in Wellington will not be getting a low pay rate. In fact, they'll be getting a higher pay rate than they currently earn now. We'll be paying in the Wellington region from $19 up to $22 per hour.
40 of the 228 new buses will be built in Tauranga, while the rest will be done overseas. They will come into use from July the 1st next year. I te whanganui a tara mō te otaka o te ahi ko Jacob McSweeney, tēnei.
Kia ora, Jacob. It began with the world's media whipped up into a frenzy. We were on air last night. It was seriously bizarre. The French were saying he was dead. The British tabloids were speculating wildly and the British broadsheets were just ignoring all the fusses somewhat beneath them. It turned out that 95-year-old Duke of Edinburgh would be retiring. Fears that Prince Philip or his wife of 69 years, almost 70 years, were ill or dead were allayed late last night when just hours after an official announcement from Buckingham Palace, the royal couple was out and about. And as Bridget Burke reports, a big fan of the royalty, our Bridget, tributes have flowed for the Prince's legacy.
I'm sorry to hear you standing down.
Attending an engagement at St James Palace in central London with his wife, the Queen, Prince Philip joked he was no longer able to stand up as much as Buckingham Palace announced he would retire in August from active public life. The Duke of Edinburgh, who will turn 96 next month and has sometimes drawn attention with headline-grabbing gaffes, has been by the Queen's side throughout her 65 years on the throne, and she has described him as my strength and stay. The announcement of his retirement was made following a meeting of all senior staff at Buckingham Palace, news of which prompted a worldwide media furore about the health of the royals. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May praised Prince Philip.
On behalf of the whole country, I want to offer our deepest gratitude and good wishes to His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, following today's announcement that he will stand down from public duties in the autumn. From his steadfast support for Her Majesty the Queen to his inspirational Duke of Edinburgh Awards and his patronage of hundreds of charities and good causes, his contribution to our United Kingdom, the Commonwealth and the wider world will be of huge benefit to us all for years to come.
Here's Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon.
Oh, he's dedicated his life to public service and to supporting the Queen. I think he's more than earned his retirement. Prince Philip, as well as the support he's given the Queen and his own public service, of course, has done an amazing amount of charity work as well, particularly through the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which in Scotland, has helped millions of young people. I think he's always gone about his public service as well with a healthy, at times even a mischievous sense of humour. So I think people today will be appreciative of everything he's done, but want to wish him all the very best for a peaceful and happy retirement.
People in London said they would miss Prince Philip's sense of humour. Outside Buckingham Palace, Australian Clem Collins, visiting from Melbourne, said the royal had done a good job.
Prince Philip's worked very hard over many years, a bit controversial at times. He's never hesitated to speak his mind, but he's been belted up a few times by the media with some criticisms, and some justified, some not. But overall, I think he's done a pretty good job.
Across Green Park in Mayfair district, Britain Anne Hutt said the Duke deserved his retirement.
He's done many years very good service, and I think he deserves to retire from public life. I really do. I think he's great.
Peter, who runs a tourist kiosk near Buckingham Palace selling postcards, scarves and royal knickknacks, said Prince Philip would be missed.
He will be missed. Why do you think that's the case? Because he does a lovely job. They both do a lovely job. He won't be there, but she'll be there, but won't be the same.
Britons say the Duke leaves a lasting legacy.
Oh, it was only a matter of time, really, but I'm actually a massive fan, so it'd be sad to see him go. He makes some really funny comments sometimes.
At his age, I think probably it gets a little bit tiring and a little bit too much. And his legacy, well, I hope some of his grandchildren have as much sense of humour as he does.
The couple, who married at Westminster Abbey in 1947, will celebrate their 70th wedding anniversary in November. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
26 minutes past 6. One is moving on now to federated farmers who fear there could be more seizures of phosphate bound for New Zealand unless political problems in northwest Africa can be resolved. The region is the largest source of phosphate, one of 3 key nutrients used in fertiliser, which is vital to this country's farming industry. New Zealand imports around 400,000 tonnes of phosphate each year. Edward O'Driscoll reports.
The 54,000-tonne phosphate shipment destined for New Zealand was detained in South Africa on Monday over claims it was illegally mined in the Western Sahara. Western Sahara has been disputed since 1974 when Morocco claimed it, and the Western Sahara Polisario movement fought a guerrilla war for the Sahrawi people's independence there. About an eighth of New Zealand's annual phosphate imports are now languishing on a ship in Port Elizabeth, and it could take several weeks to resolve the future of the Balance Agri-Nutrient shipment. A fertiliser expert at Federated Farmers, Anders Crowfoot, says New Zealand simply needs Morocco's output.
They're the largest producer, and it's a good quality product. So if that gets shut down, then it means we're going to be competing around the west of the world with other ones, and it'll probably drive the price up quite significantly.
The phosphate was detained after Polisario won a European court ruling that goods produced in Western Sahara were not to be regarded as products of Morocco. Kamal Fidel, a campaigner for Western Saharan independence, says Balance Agri-Nutrients should have dealt with his people, not Morocco, and he says the seizure could be repeated.
We'll continue to seek our rights everywhere, anytime we have the opportunity. We will use all the means available to us to protect our resources. These resources are non-renewable resources, which we will need for the building of our country. So we will continue. We will not stop. Wherever they go, we'll go after them.
And that's got Anders Crowfoot from Federated Farmers concerned.
It's been an ongoing issue and it's been escalating, so if it doesn't actually get resolved at a political level, it probably is an ongoing risk. It's a very high quality rock from there, so it's quite a desirable source, and one would hope that some of the politics can be worked out.
New Zealand imports nearly $60 million worth of phosphate every year. Vera Power from the Fertiliser Association is also concerned about another seizure, but is putting on a brave face.
That would be very disappointing, but I think we should look at it in context in terms of, the fact that it's one shipment. It is challenging to be caught up in a situation that's in a long-running political crisis. Certainly the companies will have to look at contingencies.
China, the United States and Russia are also big phosphate producers, but have big internal markets to supply. The claim involving the seized ship will be heard by a South African court on May 18th. Morocco and New Zealand farmers are hoping for a quick resolution once details of the case are heard. For Checkpoint, this is Edward O'Driscoll.
We've received a lot of feedback tonight on Pike, for which we are really grateful. Thank you. Someone comparing two stories we've covered tonight, the guilty verdicts in 10 of 11 charges in the Childcare child centre abuse case, and the Pike case. This person who texted and says, woman gets convicted for tapping kids, 29 minors die, nothing. Thank you for your feedback. We're going to end tonight with duck shooting season opening tomorrow. This year about 40,000 hunters are expected to head out to Maimais on estuaries and lakes around the country to try their luck. Conan Young reports.
Ducks, watch out. From first light tomorrow morning, the sound of shotguns will ring out on the famous first day of the duck shooting season. It's a busy time for Gun City staffer and Olympic shooter Chloe Tipple.
We refer to it as our Christmas. It's absolutely crazy. So it's our busiest month of the year. April is busier than Christmas, so it's been hectic but fun.
She says it's an outing for the whole family.
What's so exciting about it is anybody can do it. You've got a whole range of age groups that can participate, anywhere from young kids to going out with granddad. You've got a massive variety of people that can participate, and there's not a lot of sports or activities or hobbies that actually can do that.
Andrew Greaves, who's been duck hunting for 25 years, says it's important for more experienced shooters to pass on their knowledge to newbies.
Yeah, I think that's what young guys need to go and just get taught how to handle a gun, because they get the old bloodlust, when they see a bird, and the next thing, and yes, you read about it in the paper, a gun accident. There was one a few years ago, and a guy stood up in the boat, and the other guy didn't see him under the barrel and blew the top of his nut, and that's just through not being aware of your surroundings.
One newcomer to the sport, Nicole, who's planning to head out tomorrow with her partner,